Legless and abandoned in the snow, the man no one expected saved her. She wanted to reach work on time, and the streets were unusually calm. A thick layer of snow covered the sidewalks, and every step she took sank slightly, leaving a crisp imprint behind her. She loved watching the snow fall gently, covering the city in its silent beauty. But today, the snow was not just snow. It was the beginning of a nightmare she never imagined. She walked briskly, her coat wrapped tightly around her, her scarf protecting her face from the biting wind. The sun had not fully risen yet, and the world felt empty except for the occasional car slowly moving along the road. Maria had always felt safe in her neighborhood, even on cold mornings like this one. But as she approached the less crowded streets, she noticed the wind picking up. The snowflakes, once delicate and falling slowly, now seemed sharper and faster. They whipped against her cheeks, stinging like tiny needles. Maria's thoughts were on her day ahead, work, meetings, and the small errands she wanted to run afterward. She didn't notice the first signs of trouble until she heard the screeching sound behind her. A car had lost control on the icy road. Time slowed down for her. The vehicle skidded, tires spinning uselessly on the ice before crashing to the side. Panic surged in her chest. She tried to step back, but the snow and ice made her feet slip. In an instant, everything changed. The car collided with something or someone. Maria felt a sharp pain in her legs, then darkness threatened to overtake her. She realized with horror that she had been caught in the accident. The world around her was spinning. The cold air burned her lungs as she tried to scream, but her voice barely came out. She could see her own breath, foggy and uneven in the freezing air. Panic began to take over. She looked down at herself, but all she could see was blood and snow mixed together. Her legs no longer felt like her own. She tried to move, to stand, to call out for help, but the pain was unbearable. She fell back onto the icy ground, her coat wet with blood and snow. Her heart pounded so hard that it hurt her chest. She wanted to get up. She wanted to survive, but the body she had always relied on had betrayed her. The cold started to seep into her bones, the wind cutting through her coat and clothes. The city, once familiar and friendly, now felt empty and harsh. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, Maria couldn't tell. Time had lost all meaning in the cold and pain. She tried to remember what her mother had always told her. If you are ever in trouble, stay calm. Don't give up. Someone will come. But how could she stay calm when she couldn't even feel her legs? How could she believe someone would come when the streets were silent and empty? Maria's mind began to wander. She thought about her family, her small apartment, the little things she loved, her favorite coffee shop, the book she had been reading, the soft blanket she slept under every night. Memories of her childhood came rushing back, happy and safe memories. But then reality hit harder than the cold. She was alone, injured, and lying in the snow with no help in sight. Fear gripped her heart. She tried to call out again, weakly this time. Her voice was just a whisper, barely audible over the wind. Cars passed by occasionally, but none stopped. People looked, but they drove on. Maria felt the weight of being invisible, of being abandoned. She had always imagined that if something happened, someone would help her, but now she was learning a painful truth. In the world, people often keep moving, and danger could be ignored in the rush of life. Hours passed, and Maria's body began to give in to the cold. Her fingers were stiff, her face numb, and her mind foggy. She could feel her consciousness slipping in and out. Panic tried to take over again, but she fought it. She told herself to stay awake, to keep her eyes open, to not let the snow swallow her completely. She whispered to herself, "I have to survive, I have to survive." The snow kept falling, covering her coat and hair, pressing against her face. Every movement caused sharp pain, but she couldn't stop trying. She looked around, hoping for even a glimpse of help. The empty street felt endless, the buildings distant and cold. Her body ached and her mind was exhausted. Yet even in that moment of despair, a small spark of hope remained. She thought, Someone will find me. Someone has to. As night approached, the cold became harsher. The city lights blurred through the falling snow, and Maria struggled to see. Her body shivered uncontrollably, and she knew she couldn't survive much longer without help. Tears mixed with the snow on her face, freezing as they rolled down. The pain was unbearable, the loneliness crushing. She realized she was fighting not just for her body, but for her very life. And in that deep, dark moment, something inside her refused to give up. She remembered every time she had faced challenges in her life before, every small victory, every moment she had survived against odds. Maria clenched her fists, holding on to the tiniest hope that help would arrive. She focused on breathing, counting each one as a small victory. Every inhale was a reminder that she was still alive, and every exhale was a prayer for someone to come. Hours turned into what felt like an eternity. The snowstorm raged on, relentless and cold. Maria's mind drifted between consciousness and sleep, between fear and hope. She repeated her mother's words in her head, a mantra that kept her alive. "Stay calm, don't give up, someone will come." And she believed it, even when everything around her suggested otherwise. As the night deepened, Maria saw a faint movement in the distance. A shadowy figure walking carefully through the snow. Her heart leapt. Could it be? Someone had noticed her. She tried to call out, to wave her arms, but the pain in her body made even the smallest movement a struggle. Yet with every ounce of strength she had left, she raised her hand. The figure paused, then moved closer. Maria's hope, fragile but persistent, began to grow. Even though she didn't know who it was, the thought of help was enough to keep her fighting the snow and the cold. Her mind, though battered by pain and fear, focused on the possibility that her ordeal might not end in tragedy. She held onto life with a determination she didn't know she possessed, clinging to hope like a lifeline in the storm. And in that moment, as the snow continued to fall around her, Maria understood something crucial. Survival was not just about the body. It was about the mind, the will, and the hope that even in the darkest hour, someone somewhere might come to save you. Maria's heart raced as she saw the figure slowly approaching through the thick snow. For a moment, she could barely breathe, her body shivering uncontrollably from cold and fear. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to move, but she could barely lift her arms. The snow around her felt heavier, as if it were trying to pull her down, to keep her trapped forever. Yet that faint shape walking toward her sparked a tiny flame of hope that refused to be extinguished. The figure came closer, and Maria could make out a man now. He was wearing a thick jacket and boots, and his steps were careful, deliberate, as if he knew how dangerous the icy ground could be. She wanted to call out, to scream, but her voice barely escaped. Instead, she whispered, "Help, please help me." Her words were carried away by the wind, but somehow the man seemed to hear her. He stopped, looked around, and then slowly, he moved toward her again. Maria felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. Relief because someone had finally noticed her, and fear because she didn't know who he was. The city had felt empty for so long that she had almost stopped believing anyone would come. Yet here he was, and his presence was comforting in a way she couldn't describe. Her mind tried to form questions. Who is he? Will he help me? Can I trust him? But the cold and the pain made it hard to think. All she could do was wait, hoping against hope. The man finally reached her. "Are you okay? Can you move?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. Maria tried to answer, but her lips trembled, and all she could manage was a faint nod. She tried to speak again, but the words didn't come. The man's eyes scanned her quickly, taking in the blood and snow, and then he acted. He gently wrapped his jacket around her, covering her as much as he could against the cold. "You're going to be okay," he said. "I'm here now. I won't leave you." Maria wanted to believe him. She tried to smile, but her face was frozen, her body too weak. Tears filled her eyes as the reality of her situation hit her again. She was hurt, she was alone, and she had been abandoned by everyone who passed by. Yet here was someone who stopped, someone who cared. That thought gave her strength, even if only a small amount. The man carefully lifted her into his arms, moving slowly so he wouldn't cause more pain. Every step was difficult for both of them. The snow was deep, the ice slippery, and the wind cut through their layers of clothing. Maria's body ached with every movement and she tried not to cry out. The pain was unbearable, but the fear of being left alone again was stronger. She clung to the hope that this man, this stranger, could be her lifeline. As they moved, Maria's mind drifted. She thought about the moments before the accident, the way the city had looked, the quiet streets, the snow falling softly. She remembered the warmth of her apartment, her family, and her friends. Those thoughts gave her a strange sense of peace, even amid the pain. It reminded her that she had a life worth fighting for, that she had people who would care if she survived. The man's presence was steady and reassuring. He didn't rush, but he didn't hesitate either. He carried her with care, speaking softly to keep her calm. Almost there. "You're doing great," he said. Maria wanted to respond, to tell him she was grateful, but she could barely form the words. Instead, she focused on staying awake, on not letting herself drift into unconsciousness. She knew that if she did, the snow might claim her. Hours seemed to pass as they slowly made their way toward safety. The snowstorm showed no signs of stopping, and the wind was relentless. Maria's fingers were numb, and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. Her body was exhausted, but she clung to consciousness. She focused on the sound of the man's voice, the rhythm of his steps, and the small movements of his hands adjusting her position. Each tiny detail reminded her that she was not alone. At one point, Maria felt herself slipping. Her eyes closed for a moment and fear gripped her. She didn't want to sleep, not when she might never wake up. She fought to open her eyes to stay present, and the man noticed immediately. "Don't close your eyes. Stay with me," he said. His voice was firm but gentle. Maria focused all her energy on his words, repeating them in her mind like a mantra. "Stay awake. Stay awake. Someone is here." The man carried her for what felt like an eternity, but eventually the lights of a small building appeared in the distance. It was a local clinic open for emergencies. Maria's heart leapt. She could feel warmth approaching, not just from the lights but from hope itself. The man quickened his pace slightly, and she felt a surge of relief. She was going to make it. Once inside the clinic, the staff rushed to help. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, checking her vital signs, covering her in warm blankets, and speaking softly to keep her calm. The man stayed beside her, answering questions and explaining what had happened. Maria couldn't remember his name at first. She was too weak. But she felt a deep sense of gratitude toward him. He had saved her life when no one else would. As the doctors worked, Maria thought about the people who had passed by earlier and hadn't stopped. It was painful to remember, but she also realized something important. Even when the world seems cold and uncaring, there are still those who will step in, those who will show kindness without expecting anything in return. This man, this stranger, had been her miracle in the snow. The hours in the clinic were long, but Maria began to feel a small sense of safety. The pain was still there, sharp and constant, but she was alive. She could feel the warmth of blankets, the soft murmur of nurses, and the steady presence of the man who had saved her. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to hope that she could survive, that she could recover. Through it all, the man never left her side. He held her hand gently, reassured her, and made sure she knew she was not alone. His calmness balanced her fear, and his quiet strength gave her courage. Maria realized that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, from people you don't know but who show up when you need them most. As night turned into early morning, Maria began to drift into a light sleep, finally feeling the exhaustion of the past hours. The man stayed nearby, watching over her, making sure she was comfortable and safe. For the first time since the accident, she felt a flicker of peace. She knew the journey ahead would be difficult, that recovery would take time, but she also knew that she had already survived the worst. Maria's thoughts turned to the future. She thought about her family, her friends, and the life she wanted to live once she recovered. She realized that she had been given a second chance, a chance to fight, to heal, and to grow stronger. The man's unexpected act of courage had changed everything, and she felt a deep gratitude she couldn't yet express in words. Even in the midst of pain and fear, Maria felt hope. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she had already learned an important lesson. Survival is not just about the body. It's about the will, the hope, and the people who come into your life when you need them most. And tonight, in the warmth of the clinic and the care of the man who had saved her, Maria felt the first real sense of possibility in what had been the darkest night of her life. The next few days passed in a blur for Maria. After being rescued from the snow, she had been admitted to the hospital for emergency treatment. Doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. The snowstorm had left her body battered and broken, and the injuries were severe. Both of her legs had been gravely damaged in the accident, and despite the doctor's best efforts, they could not save them. Maria was now facing a life-changing reality. She would no longer walk as she had before. When she first woke up fully conscious in the hospital bed, the silence around her felt heavy. The pain in her body was overwhelming, but it was the realization of her new reality that struck her hardest. She tried to move her legs, only to remember what had happened. Panic rose in her chest and tears filled her eyes. The thought of never walking again, of losing independence, terrified her. Her heart raced, and she felt a wave of helplessness unlike anything she had ever known. A nurse entered the room, smiling gently. "Good morning, Maria." "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. Maria tried to respond, but her voice cracked, and all she could do was shake her head. The nurse nodded with understanding, placing a hand over hers. "It's okay. Take your time. You're safe here," she said. The warmth in her voice was comforting, and Maria allowed herself a small, shaky breath. She knew she was alive, and for now, that was enough. David, the man who had rescued her, came to visit later that day. Maria had learned his name from the hospital staff. She had expected a stranger to leave once the immediate danger had passed, but he had stayed nearby, checking in, offering help and quietly supporting her. When he entered the room, Maria felt a mix of relief and gratitude. He didn't say much at first, simply sitting beside her bed and holding her hand gently. I don't know what to say," Maria whispered. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You saved my life. I don't even know how to thank you." David shook his head. "You don't have to say anything." "I'm just glad I was there," he replied. His calm, steady presence helped Maria feel grounded. She realized that gratitude could be expressed without words, simply through the connection they shared in that moment. Over the next few days, Maria underwent multiple surgeries. The doctors worked carefully to ensure that she would recover without infection or other complications. The hospital staff were kind and attentive, guiding her through every step of the process. Yet as the pain slowly began to subside, another challenge appeared: the emotional struggle of accepting her new reality. She could no longer ignore the truth. Her life had changed forever. Maria spent hours staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything she had lost. Walking, running, even standing on her own, all the small things that had once seemed ordinary were now impossible. Fear of the unknown crept in. She wondered if she would ever be independent again, if she would be able to work, or even go outside without help. The thoughts were heavy, and at times she felt a wave of despair threatening to overwhelm her. But she also thought about the snowstorm, about the cold night when she had been trapped and alone. And she thought about David, the man who had refused to leave her side. That memory brought a glimmer of hope. If someone could care so deeply for a stranger in need, perhaps the world was not as harsh as it seemed. Perhaps she could find strength within herself to face this new life. Physical therapy began soon after. Maria was introduced to the idea of prosthetics and the possibility of walking again with support. The therapists were patient, guiding her through exercises that were both painful and exhausting. Every movement reminded her of the legs she had lost, but also showed her that progress was possible. She learned to use her upper body to move, to balance, and to adapt to the new limitations of her body. Each small success, even lifting herself slightly or shifting her weight, felt monumental. David continued to visit, offering encouragement and company. He did not act like a hero or expect thanks. He simply stayed. Sometimes they would sit in silence. Sometimes they would talk about everyday things, books, movies, or memories from before the accident. Those moments became a lifeline for Maria. She realized that recovery was not just about her body. It was about emotional support, trust, and human connection. One afternoon, Maria had a particularly difficult day. The exercises were painful and frustration took over. She wanted to give up. Tears streamed down her face as she gripped the edges of the therapy table. David, who was sitting nearby, noticed immediately. He approached carefully and sat beside her. "I know it hurts," he said softly, "but you're stronger than you think. Every small step is progress. You're not alone in this." Maria looked at him, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She realized that she had been facing the challenge alone in her mind, but in reality, support was there if she allowed herself to accept it. Weeks turned into months. Maria gradually adjusted to her new life. She learned to move independently with the help of prosthetics, to navigate her home, and to manage daily tasks she had once taken for granted. Every day brought challenges, but also victories. She learned to celebrate small achievements, a step taken, a meal prepared, a phone call made, recognizing that these were signs of progress, not reminders of what she had lost. Emotionally, Maria also began to heal. She allowed herself to feel sadness, anger, and fear, but she also allowed herself to feel hope, gratitude, and joy. She realized that her life had changed, but it was not over. She could still create new memories, experience happiness, and build meaningful connections. David remained a steady presence, not just as a rescuer, but as a friend and companion through her recovery. Maria also reflected on the lessons she had learned. She understood now that life was unpredictable and fragile. People could be careless or uncaring, as they had been on that snowy night. But there were also those who would step in, who would show kindness without expecting anything in return. And sometimes the smallest act, a person stopping to help, a hand reaching out, could change everything. The hospital stay ended and Maria returned to her apartment. The world outside had not changed, but she had. Snow-covered streets no longer seemed threatening but symbolic of survival and resilience. She moved carefully, using her new skills and prosthetics, but each step reminded her of how far she had come. She had survived the worst, and now she had the chance to rebuild. As she settled back into her life, Maria also thought about sharing her story. She wanted people to understand the importance of kindness, courage, and perseverance. She wanted to show that even when life changes in ways we cannot control, hope and human connection can guide us through. Her journey was far from over, but she had learned that she could face anything with support, determination, and a willingness to keep moving forward. And as Maria looked back on that snowy night, she understood one profound truth. Survival is not just about the body. It is about hope, courage, and the people who choose to be there when we need them most. David's unexpected act of heroism had given her life back, but her own strength and determination would shape the life she would build from that moment on. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a woman learning to live fully, even after the unimaginable. Maria's life slowly began to take on a new rhythm. The hospital was behind her, but the challenges of daily life were just beginning. Every task she once took for granted now required careful planning, patience, and determination. Getting out of bed, moving around her apartment, cooking a meal, even stepping outside into the winter air, all these activities had become tests of her strength and resilience. But Maria was determined to reclaim her independence, no matter how long or difficult the journey might be. Her mornings now started with physical therapy at home. She worked with her therapist to strengthen her upper body and adjust to her prosthetics. Each day, the exercises were physically demanding, and the pain was constant. Maria sometimes wondered if she could continue, if the frustration and exhaustion were worth it. But then she remembered the night in the snow when she had fought for her life. If she had survived that, she could survive this too. The memory of being rescued by David gave her courage, reminding her that she was not alone in her fight. David continued to be a steady presence in her life. He would visit frequently, helping with tasks that were still difficult for Maria. Sometimes he would cook meals, sometimes he would drive her to appointments, and sometimes he simply sat with her, offering quiet companionship. He never pressured her, never demanded anything in return. He was simply there. Maria realized that his presence was as vital as her physical therapy. The emotional support he provided helped her face challenges she might have otherwise avoided. Outside, the world was different than she remembered. People stared sometimes, curiosity or pity reflected in their eyes. At first, Maria felt embarrassed, even ashamed. She hated feeling exposed, different, or dependent on others. But gradually, she learned to meet those glances with quiet confidence. She reminded herself that her life had changed, yes, but it had not ended. She was learning a new way to live, and with each step she took, she grew stronger both physically and emotionally. One afternoon, Maria decided to leave her apartment alone for the first time. She had carefully planned the route, making sure she could navigate the streets safely with her wheelchair and prosthetics. Her heart pounded with nervous excitement. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, but also a strange sense of freedom. She was no longer trapped, no longer confined by fear. Step by step, she moved forward, discovering that the city she had once known now felt unfamiliar, yet full of possibility. The first few days outside were difficult. The snow-covered sidewalks were slippery, and the crowded streets made movement challenging. But Maria refused to give up. She learned to ask for help when necessary, to adapt, and to plan ahead. Each successful journey outside was a small victory, a reminder that she could live independently despite her new circumstances. And each time she returned home, exhausted but triumphant, she felt a growing sense of confidence and pride. Maria also began to reconnect with her friends and family. At first, she had been hesitant, unsure how they would react to her injuries. But when they saw her determination, her courage, and the progress she had made, they were filled with admiration. Visits became more frequent, filled with laughter, shared stories, and gentle support. Maria realized that accepting help did not make her weak, it allowed her to grow stronger. Human connection, she understood now, was as important as physical strength. At home, she started small projects to regain a sense of normalcy. Cooking meals, organizing her apartment, even decorating her space became acts of empowerment. She was reclaiming control over her life, learning that independence was not defined by walking, but by the ability to make choices, to solve problems, and to live fully despite limitations. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, was a victory. Work became another challenge. Maria had been away for months, and returning to her job required adjustments. Colleagues were supportive, offering assistance when needed, but she had to learn to navigate the workplace in a new way. She adapted her workspace, adjusted her schedule, and learned to rely on technology to complete tasks more efficiently. The return was difficult, but also empowering. Maria realized that her value was not determined by physical ability alone, but by her intelligence, skill, and perseverance. One evening, as Maria rested in her apartment, she reflected on her journey. The winter night outside was calm, the snow no longer threatening but serene. She thought about the accident, the terrifying hours alone in the snow, and the moment David had found her. She realized that her life had been transformed not just by tragedy, but by the kindness and courage of others. That realization filled her with gratitude and a desire to help others whenever possible. Maria began volunteering at a local support center for people with disabilities. She wanted to share her experience, to inspire and encourage others who were facing challenges similar to her own. She spoke about hope, resilience, and the importance of community. She shared practical tips she had learned during her recovery, how to navigate public spaces, how to use adaptive equipment, and how to maintain a positive mindset. Her story became a beacon of hope for many, showing that life, even after dramatic change, could still be full and meaningful. Through all of this, her bond with David grew stronger. They spent time together outside of the hospital and therapy sessions, sharing meals, walks, and quiet conversations. Maria realized that friendship could be profound, rooted in mutual respect, trust, and shared experience. She learned that relationships were not just about proximity or familiarity, but about presence, compassion, and understanding. David's unexpected act of heroism had brought them together, but their growing friendship was built on much more than that single moment. Challenges continued to arise. Some days were harder than others. Prosthetics caused discomfort, therapy sessions were exhausting, and the physical limitations of her new life were constant reminders of what she had lost. Yet, Maria had learned to face these challenges with patience and determination. She set small goals each day, celebrated achievements, and forgave herself for setbacks. She discovered that resilience was not about never failing, but about rising again each time she stumbled. As spring approached, Maria felt a renewed sense of freedom. The snow melted, leaving behind streets that were easier to navigate. She could explore her neighborhood more comfortably, visit parks, and enjoy the simple pleasures of life outdoors. The city no longer felt cold and intimidating. It felt alive and full of possibilities. Maria realized that her journey had taught her something profound. Life's obstacles could not be erased, but they could be overcome with courage, support, and determination. By the time summer arrived, Maria had regained much of her independence. She could move freely, manage her apartment, and pursue work and social activities with confidence. Her life had changed, undeniably, but she had adapted, grown, and flourished. She looked back on the snowy night, the terrifying hours alone, and the fear that had seemed insurmountable, and she smiled. She had survived, yes, but more than that, she had learned to live fully. Maria understood now that recovery was not a straight path. It was filled with twists, setbacks, and triumphs. It required patience, courage, and support from those willing to walk beside you. And she had discovered that even in the darkest moments, there were people who could bring light. A simple act of kindness, a hand held in compassion, a presence that refused to leave. David had been that light for her, but she also realized that she could now be a light for herself and for others. Her journey was ongoing. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome, and more moments of fear. But Maria had grown stronger. She had learned that life could still be beautiful, full of opportunity, and meaningful, even after unimaginable loss. Every day was a new chance to move forward, to grow, and to embrace the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. And with each passing day, Maria walked further into a future filled with hope, resilience, and the quiet joy of living fully. Despite everything she had endured, Maria had come a long way from the night she had been trapped in the snow. Life had changed in ways she could never have imagined, yet she had adapted, learned, and grown stronger. The journey had been filled with pain, fear, and countless obstacles, but it had also been filled with hope, kindness, and moments of profound courage. As she reflected on everything that had happened, she realized that her life, though transformed, was far from over. In fact, it was beginning anew, with lessons and strength she had never known before. By now, Maria had fully settled into her new life. Her apartment, once a place of simple comfort, had become a space of independence and empowerment. Every corner had been adapted to her needs, allowing her to move freely and confidently. She had mastered the use of her prosthetics, navigating stairs, sidewalks, and crowded streets with skill and patience. Each step she took was not just physical, it was symbolic of the determination and resilience she had cultivated. Her work life had also returned to a satisfying rhythm. Colleagues had grown accustomed to her new way of moving, and Maria had adapted to her tasks with creativity and confidence. Technology had helped her remain productive, while her determination and intelligence ensured that she continued to excel. Each day she spent at work was a reminder that her value was not defined by physical ability alone. Her skills, her perseverance, and her courage were equally, if not more, important. Maria's relationship with David had evolved naturally over time. What had begun as a connection forged in crisis had grown into a strong friendship. They shared quiet moments, laughter, and thoughtful conversations. David's support had never wavered, and Maria had come to rely on his presence not out of necessity, but out of trust and mutual respect. Their bond was now built on shared experiences, understanding, and a deep sense of care. She had learned that meaningful relationships were formed not just in comfort, but also in adversity, and often in the most unexpected ways. One afternoon, Maria decided to take a long walk through the park near her home. The sun was warm, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and birds sang from the branches above. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for being alive, for having survived the snowstorm, and for the people who had helped her along the way. Each step in the park felt like a celebration of her life, a reminder that even after darkness, beauty and hope could be found. As she moved along the path, she thought about the countless small victories that had brought her to this point. Learning to dress independently, cooking her own meals, navigating the city, returning to work, and even building a new social life. All of these accomplishments were testaments to her resilience. They reminded her that survival was not only about enduring pain, but also about embracing the opportunities life still offered. Each step forward was an act of courage, a declaration that she would not let her past define her future. Maria also became increasingly involved in helping others. She volunteered at a local center for people with disabilities, sharing her story to inspire hope and resilience. She spoke about the importance of patience, determination, and seeking support when needed. She encouraged others to celebrate small successes and to focus on progress rather than setbacks. Her words were powerful because they came from lived experience. People listened, learned, and found courage in her journey. Maria realized that she could transform her own suffering into a source of hope for others, a way of giving back and making her struggle meaningful. Through her volunteer work, Maria met people from all walks of life who were facing challenges of their own. She listened to their stories, offered advice, and sometimes simply sat with them in silence. She discovered that healing was not just about physical recovery, it was about emotional growth, empathy, and human connection. Helping others gave her purpose, a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. It reminded her that life was not just about surviving, it was about living fully and making a difference wherever possible. David continued to be a constant presence in her life, but Maria also began to form a wider circle of support. Friends, family, and members of the volunteer center became part of her world, offering companionship, encouragement, and laughter. Maria realized that accepting help and building relationships was not a sign of weakness, but a recognition of the power of community. She understood that life was meant to be shared, and that strength came not only from within, but also from the connections she nurtured around her. One evening, Maria attended a small gathering at the volunteer center. The room was filled with people who had faced adversity, each sharing stories of challenge, courage, and triumph. Maria listened quietly, feeling a sense of solidarity and inspiration. When it was her turn to speak, she shared her journey from the night in the snow to her present life. She spoke of fear, pain, loss, and despair, but also of hope, kindness, and resilience. Her words resonated deeply with everyone in the room. She realized that her story, once filled with fear and uncertainty, had become a message of empowerment for others. As she left the gathering, Maria felt a profound sense of peace. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The accident, the terrifying night alone in the snow, the rescue, the painful recovery, and the gradual rebuilding of her life. She understood that each step, no matter how small or difficult, had contributed to the person she had become. She had survived, adapted, and grown, and in doing so, she had discovered a strength she had never known existed. Maria also reflected on the kindness she had received from David and others. She realized that the actions of a single person could change the course of a life. David's decision to stop and help her in the snow had been the turning point, the moment when survival became possible. That thought filled her with gratitude and inspired her to continue helping others in turn. She understood that hope could be shared, that courage could be passed on, and that one act of kindness could ripple outward in ways unimaginable. As the months passed, Maria's confidence grew. She ventured further from home, exploring new neighborhoods, visiting friends, and participating in community events. She discovered new hobbies such as painting and writing, which allowed her to express her feelings and creativity. Each day was a reminder that life, even after dramatic change, could be full of meaning, joy, and possibility. She embraced each experience with gratitude, aware of how fragile and precious life truly was. Maria also came to terms with her physical limitations. She accepted that life would never be the same as before, but she no longer saw her disability as a barrier. Instead, she viewed it as a part of her story, a part that had taught her resilience, empathy, and the value of human connection. She had learned to focus not on what she had lost, but on what she could achieve. This shift in perspective gave her freedom and empowerment, allowing her to live fully and purposefully. One winter evening, Maria sat by her window, watching snowflakes fall gently to the ground. The memory of the night she had been trapped in the snow came to mind, but instead of fear, she felt gratitude. She had survived, she had adapted, and she had grown stronger. She thought about David, her friends, and the countless people who had supported her. She understood that life was unpredictable and fragile, but it was also filled with moments of beauty, courage, and love. Maria's journey had transformed her in ways she could never have imagined. She had faced unimaginable fear, endured physical and emotional pain, and navigated the challenges of a new life. Yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had discovered the power of hope, the importance of resilience, and the profound impact of human kindness. And she knew that her story was not just about survival. It was about living fully, embracing change, and inspiring others to do the same. As she looked out at the snow-covered world, Maria smiled. She understood that her life had been forever changed, but it had also been enriched by the lessons she had learned. She had found courage in the face of fear, hope in the midst of despair, and strength in the support of others. And in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself, to live fully, to embrace each day, and to continue sharing her story, so that others might find the hope and courage they needed to face their own challenges. Maria had survived the night in the snow. She had endured the pain, the loss, and the uncertainty of recovery. But most importantly, she had learned to live again, not just to exist, but to thrive, to grow, and to inspire. Her journey was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of kindness, and the beauty of hope. And as she stepped forward into her new life, she carried with her the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, there was always the possibility of light.